everyone, it's Michelle Lupton here, and today I have a video to share with you of a card I've made for the Hero Arts new release of their spring catalogue. So there are some amazing products in this new catalogue, and this background stamp is probably up there amongst my favourites. I can't even say it's my favourite because there are so many favourites in this new release. Alright, so I'm starting with this stamp. It is called the Espalier Fruit Tree Bold Prints background stamp. I think this is going to be a firm favourite of mine for a very, very long time. And I have inked it up with some Versamark ink. Just a little hint with Versamark ink, with any embossing ink, come to mention that. I recently did some white heat embossing on black cardstock, not for this card, for another card, and I just couldn't get it to work. And I thought I was just losing my marbles because I usually can get really good white embossed sentiments on black cardstock, and I just couldn't get it to work, and I was getting so frustrated with myself, and I had to just change the card I was making and come back to it another day. And the other day I realised I needed to re-ink my embossing ink pad. So just a reminder, if you haven't re-inked your embossing ink pad in a while, go and do it. Alright, so with this card I have white embossed my background image, and now I'm taking some reactive inks, and as you can see I'm applying them directly over that white embossing. I decided to make my rainbow sort of radiate out from the centre of the card, and I'm going to be putting my sentiment in the centre of the card, but I'm trying very hard not to overlap the colours at the bottom with the colours at the top, or the colours on the left with the colours on the right. Because I'm doing it in a circle around this card, any colour that is opposite on the opposite side of the card is going to be opposite on the colour wheel, which means that when they come together I could very well get mud. So I tried really hard. I don't mind if I get overlap between, for example, the pink and the orange, or between the blue and the green, but if I do get overlap between, say, the purple and the yellow, I'm going to get mud. So I tried very hard to avoid that. So the colours that I used are the Hero Arts Reactive Taffy, which is the pink, Creamsicle orange, Lemon Drop, which is yellow, Key Lime Fizz, which is the sort of lime green colour. Then I used Pool Party, which is a lovely blue-green, the Splash Reactive ink, and the Thistle Reactive ink, which is the purple. Okay, so you can see I just sprayed the whole panel with water after applying the ink. Then I used my paintbrush to sort of spread the colour out, and then I dried it with my heat tool. Now this paper I used Bristol cardstock, and it did warp a little bit. That's okay, I just used my fingers to sort of get it back in shape. I decided I needed a little bit more colour. So what I'm doing is I've just squished my little ink pad, my little ink cube, onto my non-stick craft mat. I'm just using my craft mat as a palette here, and I'm using my paintbrush to pick up some of that colour to add to the colour that I already have down there. Yes, I just dropped the ink pad in the wrong spot, but Baby White picked it up, no problem, it's all good. So you can see I'm just adding it in bits and pieces. I'm not going over the whole area. I'm just sort of dropping it in little drops here and there, because I wanted the colour to be a little bit more intense in some areas and a little bit less intense in other areas. I also wanted there to be a little bit of overlap between the neighbouring colours, not the ones on the opposite side of the colour wheel, but with neighbouring colours, or in other words, analogous colours. So for example, here I've got the lime green that's going in between the bluey green and the yellow, and I don't mind if they overlap a little bit, so I'm just adding little splotches of colour, allowing a bit of overlap but also allowing variation in the intensity of the colours here. Now these reactive inks are so easy to work with, And you can see I'm just using a baby wipe to wipe up any excess that I had after I've sort of painted on my extra little blobs of colour. I probably should have got out some little spare bits of cardstock, and when I'd finished with each little bit of colour, I could have just smushed my cardstock into the leftover colour and got some interesting backgrounds. But yeah, I should have thought about it at the time, but hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? Oh well. Next time. Now you can see that this background image has lots of little pockets where the colour and the water get trapped, so I can have intense pockets of colour in between the white lines of the embossing and other areas that are not so intense. Okay, so now I'm ready to start putting my cards together. So I've got a top folding white note card that I've cut from Nina Solar White cardstock, and I knew I was going to be cutting this panel down. I also want to make sure that it is relatively centered on the card so that the center of the image is in the center of my card. So I cut it down and added, sort of cut off little bits because I wanted there to be a white border. I always like a little bit of white space, even if it's just a tiny bit of white space. I get anxious if there's no white space on a card anywhere. Now, because this panel is slightly warped, I pulled out the big guns. In other words, my ATG. So this is my Scotch ATG gun. I find that the adhesive in this is really, really strong. So I especially use it when I have something that is on either Bristol or on watercolour cardstock, and I want to make sure it's not going to budge, not going to pop off my card base. Now you can see that I sort of tried to decide which way I was going to have it. Usually I have pink and orange at the top of cards, but the pink and orange seemed to be a little bit more intense, so I thought they looked a bit heavier, so I put them at the bottom because I didn't want my card to look top heavy. You also might have noticed that I went through with a wet baby wipe and just rubbed over some of those lines of embossing because I did have a little bit of colour that was sitting on top of the white embossing. So just a damp baby wipe rubbed over very, very gently over the top will remove that ink. All right, so what you can see now is I've pulled out some black glitter cardstock, which is also from Hero Arts, and I've also pulled out the amazing fancy die. There's a few little dies. They actually match the stamp set that came with I think it was the April, My Monthly Hero kit from last year, and I'm so happy that that was the kit that was voted by the public vote to be the one that comes back. So that kit is now available as separate products for you to buy. So there's a big background stamp, there's matching layering stencils, there's this amazing fancy die which has the amazing, and it actually has the background like a shadow layer of that word die, and also some dies that sort of fit the images in the background stamp. But also there's this tiny little sentiment set which is called Thank You for Everything, which has some really, really useful just little words that you can add above and below a word die. And it doesn't even have to be this word amazing. You could use it, you could have the word die of happy and put birthday with it. You could have thank you word die and put I appreciate you. You could put a hello die and say hello friend. Or there's heaps of things that go with this word amazing in the stamp set as well. So as you can see, I am just stamping with some black, intensified black ink from Hero Arts, and I've just stamped that onto some white cardstock, and I'm just using my little mini paper trimmer here to cut them out. I had to stamp a couple of times because for some reason I didn't pull out my MISTI to do stamping. I just did it with a acrylic block, and I always end up with boo-boos when I stamp with an acrylic block. That's just me. Anyway, so I'm using this tiny little paper trimmer to make sure I'm cutting down my sentiments so that they're nice and snug and can fit around my word die. So I've got the words have an for above the sentiment and birthday for below the sentiment. All right, so just about finished cutting those down. Really easy to line it up with this little paper trimmer. And now I'm going to just assemble it. And this is the part that always takes me the longest in a card. You'll see me just faffing around trying to get everything in the right spot. But I didn't want to obscure much of the gorgeous background. I just wanted the sentiment to be right in the middle and not sort of taking away from that beautiful rainbow and absolutely stunning background stamp that I've used. All right, I decided I didn't want to have heaps of dimension on this sentiment, so I'm just adhering the little stamped words so that they'll be behind the amazing word die. It's not going to be very much of an overlap with them, but just a teeny tiny bit of an overlap. So the amazing is on the top. And then I'm going to add some glue to the back of the word die, and that will be done. All right, so once I've got that adhered, I decided not to add any other embellishments because the black glitter cardstock was enough shine for me on that amazing word die. So thank you very, very much for watching today. I hope you enjoy the new release from Hero Arts. We've got lots more inspiration coming your way. And please check out, there's a new class coming up for the spring stamp-along for Hero Arts, so check that out. I'll put a link below to that. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time. Bye.